Hi, boys and girls. Welcome back. We're still working on biographies. You ready for our riddle? Okay, this is kind of a long one. What vegetable do you throw away the outside, cook the inside, eat the outside, and throw away the inside? Think about that. Today we're going to read Harvesting Hope, the story of Cesar Chavez. It's by Kathleen Kroll, illustrated by Yui Morales. Harvesting Hope. Until Cesar Chavez was 10, every summer night was like a fiesta. Relatives swarmed onto the ranch for barbecues with watermelon, lemonade, and fresh corn. Cesar and his brothers and sisters and cousins settled down to sleep under the netting to keep mosquitoes out. But who could sleep with uncles and aunts singing and spinning ghost stories, telling magical tales of life back in Mexico? Cesar thought the whole world belonged to his family. The 80 acres of their ranch were an island in the shimmering Arizona desert, under the starry skies, and the starry skies were all their own. It looks like a fun time. Many years earlier, Cesar's grandfather had built a spacious adobe house to last forever, with walls 18 inches thick, a vegetable garden, cows and chickens supplied all the food they could want. With hundreds of cousins on farms nearby, there was always someone to play with. Cesar's best friend was his brother Richard. They never spent a day apart. Cesar was so happy at home that he was a little afraid when school started. On his first day, he grabbed the seat next to his older sister, Rita. The teacher moved him to another seat, and Cesar flew out the door and ran home. It took 3 days of coaxing for him to get him to return to school and take his place with the other first graders. Cesar was stubborn, but he was not a fighter. His mother cautioned her children against fighting, urging them to use their minds and mouths to work out conflicts. Beautiful illustrations. Then in 1937, the summer Cesar was 10, the trees around the ranch began to wilt. The sun baked the farm soil rock hard. A drought was choking off the life out of Arizona. Without water for their crops, the Chavez family couldn't make the money to pay its bills. There came a day when Cesar's mother couldn't stop crying. In a daze, Cesar watched his father strap their possessions onto the roof of their old car. After a long struggle, the family no longer owned the ranch. They had no choice but to join hundreds of thousands of people fleeing to the green valleys of California to look for work. Cesar's old life had vanished. Now he and his family were migrants, working on other people's farms, crisscrossing California, picking whatever fruits and vegetables were in season. When the Chavez family arrived at their new home in California, they found a battered old shed. Its doors were missing, and garbage covered the dirt floor. Cold, damp air seeped into their bedding and clothes. They shared water and outdoor toilets with dozens of other families, and overcrowding made everything filthy. The neighbors were constantly fighting, and the noise upset Cesar. He had no place to play games with Richard. Meals were sometimes made of dandelion greens gathered along the road. Cesar swallowed his bitter homesickness and worked alongside his family. He was small and not very strong, but still a fierce worker. Nearly every crop caused torment. Yanking out beets broke the skin between his thumb and index finger. Grapevines sprayed with bug-killing chemicals made his eyes sting and his lungs wheeze. Lettuce had to be the worst. Thinning lettuce all day with a short-handled hoe would make hot spasms shoot through his back. Farm chores on someone else's farm instead of his own felt like a form of slavery. The Chavez family talked constantly of saving enough money to buy back their ranch. But each sundown, the whole family had earned as little as 30 cents for a day's work. As the years blurred together, they spoke of the ranch less and less. The towns weren't much better than the fields. White trade-only signs were displayed in many stores and restaurants. None of the 35 schools Caesar attended over the years seemed to be a safe place either. Once, after Caesar broke a rule about speaking English at all times, a teacher hung a sign on him that read, "I am a clown. I speak Spanish." He came to hate school because of the conflicts, though he liked to learn, even considered his 8th grade graduation a miracle. After 8th grade, he dropped out to work full-time. That wasn't very nice, was it? His lack of schooling embarrassed Caesar for the rest of his life. But as a teenager, he just wanted to put food on his family's table. As he worked, it disturbed him that landowners treated their workers more like farm tools than human beings and provided no clean drinking water, rest periods, or access to bathroom. Anyone who complained was fired, beaten up, or sometimes murdered. So like other migrant workers, Caesar was afraid and suspicious whenever outsiders showed up to try to help. How could they know about feeling so powerless? Who could battle such odds? Yet Caesar had never forgotten his old life in Arizona and the jolt he'd felt when it was turned upside down. Farm work did not have to be this miserable. Reluctantly, he started paying attention to the outsiders. He began to think that maybe there was hope, and in his early 20s, he decided to dedicate the rest of his life to fighting for change. Again, he crisscrossed California, this time to talk to people into joining his fight. At first, out of every 100 workers he talked to, perhaps one would agree with him. One by one, this is how we started. At the first meeting Caesar organized, a dozen women gathered. He sat quietly in a corner. After 20 minutes, everyone started wondering when the organizer would show up. Caesar thought he might die of embarrassment. "Well, I am the organizer," he said, and forced himself to keep talking, hoping to inspire their respect with his new suit and the mustache he was trying to grow. The women listened politely, and he was sure they did so out of pity. But despite his shyness, Caesar showed a knack for solving problems. People trusted him. With workers, he was endlessly patient and compassionate. With landowners, he was stubborn, demanding, and single-minded. He was learning to be a fighter. In the fight for justice, he told everyone, truth was a better weapon than violence. Nonviolence, he said, takes more guts. It meant using imagination to find ways to overcome powerlessness. And more people listened. One night, 150 people poured into an abandoned theater in Fresno. At this first meeting of the National Farm Workers Association, Caesar unveiled its flag, a bold black eagle, the sacred bird of the Aztec Indians. La Casa, the cause, was born. It was time to rebel. The place was Delano, here in the heart of lush San Joaquin Valley. A brilliant green vineyards reached toward every horizon. Poorly paid workers, hundreds over grapevines for most of each year. Then in 1965, the vineyard owners cut their pay even further. Caesar chose to fight just one of the 40 landowners, hopeful that others would get the message. As the plump grapes dropped, thousands of workers walked off that company's field in a strike or a huelga. Grapes, when ripe, do not last long. The company fought back with everything from punches to bullets. Caesar refused to respond with violence. Violence would only hurt La Casa. Instead, he organized a march of more than 300 miles. He and his supporters will walk from Delano to the state capitol in Sacramento to ask for the government's help. Caesar and 67 others started out one morning. Their first obstacle was the Delano police force, 30 of whose numbers locked arms to prevent the group from crossing the street. After 3 hours of arguing in public, the chief of police backed down. Joyous marchers headed north under the sizzling sun. Their rallying cry was, "Si, se puede," or "Yes, it can be done." The first night they reached Ducor, the marchers slept outside the tiny cabin of the only person who would welcome them. Single file, they continued, covering an average of 15 miles a day. They inched their way through the San Joaquin Valley, while the unharvested grapes in Delano turned white with mold. Caesar developed painful blisters right away. He and many others had blood seeping out of their shoes. The word spread. Along the way, farm workers offered food and drink. As marchers passed, when the sun set, the marchers lit candles and kept going. Shelter was no longer a problem. Supporters began welcoming them each night with feasts. Every night was a rally. "Our pilgrimage is the match," one speaker shouted. "That will light our cause for all farm workers to see what is happening here." Another cried, "We seek basic, God-given rights as human beings. Viva la casa." Eager supporters would keep the marchers up half the night talking about change. Every morning, the line of marchers swelled. Caesar always in the lead. On the 9th day, hundreds marched through Fresno. The long, peaceful march was a shock to people unaware of how California farm workers had to live. Now students, public officials, religious leaders, and citizens from everywhere offered to help. For the grape company, the publicity was becoming unbearable, and on the vines, the grapes continued to rot. In Modesto, on the 15th day, an exhilarated crowd celebrated Caesar's 38th birthday. 2 days later, 5,000 people met the marchers in Stockton with flowers, guitars, and accordions. That evening, Caesar received a message that he was sure was a prank. But in case it was true, he left the march and had someone drive him all night to the mansion of wealthy Beverly Hills. Officials from the grape company were waiting for him. They were ready to recognize the authority of the National Farm Workers Association, promising a contract with pay raises and better conditions. Caesar rushed back to join the march. On Easter Sunday, when the marchers arrived in Sacramento, the parade was 10,000 people strong. From the steps of the state capitol building, the joyous announcement was made to the public. Cesar Chavez had just signed the first contract for farm workers in American history. The parade erupted into giant fiesta. A crowd swarmed the steps, some people cheering, many weeping. Prancing horses carried men in mariachi outfits. Everyone sang and waved flowers or flags. They made a place of honor for the 57 marchers who had walked the entire journey. Speaker after speaker, addressing the audience in Spanish and English, took to the microphone. "You cannot close your eyes and ears to us any longer," cried one. "You cannot pretend that we do not exist." The crowd celebrated until the sky was full of stars. The march had taken its toll. Caesar's leg was swollen and he was running a high fever. Gently, he reminded everyone that the battle was not over. It is well to remember that there must be courage, but also in victory, there must be humility. Much more work lay ahead, but the victory was stunning. Some of the wealthiest people in the country had been forced to recognize some of the poorest people as human beings. Cesar Chavez had won this fight without violence, and he would never be powerless again. It's an amazing story, and no violence. He changed the world. Okay, what veggie do you throw away the outside, cook the inside, eat the outside, and throw away the inside? Corn! You peel the corn, throw it away, that's the outside. Then you cook the inside, and you eat the inside, and then you throw away the core of the corn when you're done. Silly. I miss you. I love you. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.